Hi, friends, and welcome back to another episode of the I Owe It to Myself podcast as we continue with our bookish fun. As you are listening to this introduction, this is in present day as I am editing this podcast, and that is one of the things that I wanted to talk about. So for this intro to this episode, I'm just going to touch on a couple of different things in relation to the podcast and where I'm at with everything, and then we will go ahead and dive into the chapters. So the first point that I'll make is in relation to what I was saying, which is my approach to introductions. I have occasionally inserted a present day recording into the beginning of an episode in order to add to something or adjust something, mostly at the beginning of the episode, but I haven't done this a lot. And so far it's worked out okay, but I did have this thought recently where if there was any update that I wanted to give or something that I want to talk about pre-diving into the chapters for that episode, there is a risk of that information just not making as much sense when I do it at the time that I'm recording my thoughts about the book, rather than me giving the update when I edit the episode. Because when I'm editing the episode, even if I hold it back for like a week or two, it will still be more of a current thought than when I would have recorded my thoughts in the first place. For example, if I record episodes for a read along, it may take me a week or two before I actually go ahead and edit it. And then once I edit it, I may not post it for another week. I don't think I've ever held on to something for a month, but my point is let's say that that's what happens. Then that means that I would have recorded and given thoughts 3 weeks, 4 weeks in the past from when the episode goes up. For the chapters itself, it's irrelevant because I'm still talking about these book chapters. It has nothing to do with the present day. But if I'm talking about where I'm at with my podcast or how I feel about things or whatever, that ends up getting a little bit dated. And sure, if I do all of my introductions or any episode that has an introduction where I'm talking about something in relation to the business or creating the content or what have you, if all of them are like that, then they all still kind of fall in line with each other in terms of time, and you're not really out of place. But I just felt like it might make more sense to try this. So from this point going forward, you're probably going to hear me pop in and say, I'm coming to you from present day as I edit this episode, and give some kind of update or some kind of nugget that maybe I want to share, or maybe I won't, but I think all of these introductions are going to be more at the time of me editing, just in case there's something I want to say. So again, it's more current with when the episode itself is going to get posted. With all of that, a couple of updates for the podcast. We are now on Threads. That is the most recent social media account that we have made. I've been lurking on Threads as a consumer from my personal account for a month or so now, kind of consistently, and it is just so funny. And it's almost like what Twitter was when it was in its heyday, and it's just like appropriately over the edge for me in all of the right ways. And so I've been getting a lot of joy out of it. I just feel like I think that there's enough traffic and audience there for me to make an account there, but as with anything, the struggle is growing the accounts, right? And YouTube is pretty lackluster right now, and that, of course, is my main platform for posting videos. Instagram, we're doing okay. TikTok and Threads are, and then again, YouTube itself are not so great. So I don't necessarily have a social media plan. I am just trying to be present on as many platforms as I can, post, the schedule posts that I have, or posting the episodes are live across all of these platforms, and trying to make myself as present across all of those as I can while I feel like they are a platform that is getting enough audience to be worthwhile of posting on. I know that it might seem kind of nuts to add another social media account when I'm not getting a lot of traction on what I'm already doing. But again, I just feel like the more that I can put the exposure out there of this podcast, the better that it will be. And I've mentioned this in the past, but as much as I am enjoying doing this, I'm not necessarily in a rush. Like, I would love for this to become something that people really love and enjoy, and that they want to listen to, and that they find a lot of good nuggets in when they listen to it, and that they feel like how I'm sharing thoughts is relatable, or that it at least gets their mind in a place to like think about things differently or have a dialogue in the YouTube space. That is the goal for people who are into reading as much as I am. But I'm not necessarily in a rush. And I think that if I was putting 110% into this whole thing all the time and into every channel, I would like to believe that the outcome would be different, but that's where this side of content creation and podcasting becomes difficult. I'm currently going through some changes with my full-time job, and it's really hard to find motivation right now. And you would think that if I have a lot of this excess time that I would be diving into my creative thing, but it has been hard to find that motivation to pour into really anything when I'm having some odd times with what it is that is supposed to be taking up my 9 to 5 every single day. You would also then think, well, this could be your 9 to 5 if you were pouring everything into it. But again, it's not all linear. Not everything is that black and white. And I only am sharing this to just be that reminder to anybody who wants to ever start a passion project or get into content creation or podcasting or anything. I mean, I'm not the expert on any of this stuff, but it is just that reminder that you are entirely allowed to be human and have moments where you just don't quite get through as much as you want to. And I saw something the other day, I don't have the quote in front of me. I remember it really stood out to me at the time. It was something along the lines of, just because you don't get everything on your to-do list done doesn't mean that you're not productive. And it's a solid reminder that there will always be something more to tackle and to do, whether it be house chores or like adulting things that you have to take care of in life, or a list at work, or a list for a passion project. And it is okay if you only get one of the things on that list done, or hell, if there are days where you don't get any of it done. There are ways that you can be productive in life or feel okay about the situation that you're in without making a huge dent in these proverbial lists that we put together. And I think especially right now when things are as crazy in America as they are, and there's as much happening in the world and on the news as there is, you are allowed to take things in stride. So I am in one of those moments, and have been for a couple of weeks, where it's been a little bit harder for me to stay motivated and to stay plugged in. But I'm excited about the fact that we're on Threads, and I'm excited about the fact that I'm actually using the Buffer platform now to schedule my social media posts. And this is super exciting for me because I had thought about using some kind of scheduler for a while, and Buffer is so easy to use and it worked. Like, I have used them professionally, or have had like accounts where my colleagues have used them professionally before, but I've never really like kept up to it or fully dived into it. So I don't know a lot about it. And so there was just this hesitancy where I was like, damn, is this actually going to work? But it made me feel like that was the piece that I was kind of missing. So when I sit here and I say, well, I have content where sometimes I record and then I don't get to editing it for a couple of weeks. Editing is by far the most like annoying part of this entire endeavor. And so if I can just get through that, and I can I can set a good pace with myself for recording and editing episodes, then I don't have to wait until a quote unquote appropriate time to post it. I can go into a platform like Buffer and schedule it for when that appropriate time is, and it is completely out of my mind. I don't have to worry about it. The only thing that I've been doing is logging into Instagram to post the post as stories, because I still feel like having it as a posted reel and a story is kind of nice to do both. But other than that, it's already changed the game, and I've only used it for posts across 2 separate days. So I'm actually really excited for how this may help me going forward, and how it may change the game a little bit for me. And it's just one of those things where it's like, anything you can take off of your plate and automate, there's nothing wrong with that. So I'm interested to see how this goes. I'll keep you all posted, but just excited to share that, even in my moments where I'm not as motivated as I once was, anytime I pick up a book, I generally am interested and enjoying the story and thankful that I had read. I get reinvigorated again to record and to pour into this, and I, in the background, and I'm finding some ways to automate some things to help the process along. And I'm excited about where this is going to take this. So happy to share that with you all. Hope that we can continue to grow this community on all of these social channels, and that we can really get some followers and like get a community really going with this. Time will just tell of how that goes. So those were all of the updates that I had to share at the top of this episode. Now you're going to dive into the chapters for this read along. In the second episode of the Serpent and Wings of Night read-along series, we're going to be talking about chapters 23 through 37. As we dive in, I want to mention how I feel that, especially in these chapters, we have a lot of action that is sandwiched by this relationship that's building between Oriah and Rain. When I left off, we were just getting to the content where Rain ends up following Oriah and seeing her hunt vampires in the human district. And this is at the point where they're trying to figure out how to work with each other because they're coming up on a trial where they have to partner together or have some kind of ally. And they end up forming this bond in training together by killing vampires who are killing humans, because that's what Oriah had already done. And so when Hunt sees her doing this, this is the beginning of them really seeing each other. And what I mean by that is there was obviously some interest there. There was obviously a little bit of like trust in the sense that I know I need you and I know that you saved my life, but I'm very hesitant of you. They like tolerated each other basically. And Misha's obviously around too, and she just kind of like enjoys the whole thing. But this was really kind of the turning point from my perspective in their relationship of starting to actually see each other for who they really are, because it is blatantly obvious that Oriah is human. That is her biggest downfall in this whole tournament that's happening, and has been her biggest downfall her entire life. But with Rain, she just lumps him in like every other vampire. And what he is doing is peeling back these layers, not only of her so he can understand her better, but is breaking down these assumptions and walls that she has up of what a vampire is. And I don't think he's doing it intentionally, but every time he shows a little bit of himself or sees a little bit in her, they're just building this relationship together. That whole like scene and situation of them like working together to hunt vampires is great, and it feels like this very pivotal shift in terms of them having a true allyship with one another. And it all comes crashing down when there's the attack at the Moon Palace. What is a turning point with this is that automatically Oriah's dad assumes that it's the Rishan vampires because they are the enemy in his lands, right? You have the Hiaj vampires, which is what his lineage is, and then you have the Rishans. And he thinks that the Rishans are attacking as a way to get at him and to take down any chance of like the Hiaj continuing to rule. Because the only way that rule is ever going to change is if any potential heir to Vincent's crown dies, which in this case would be Oriah, because she would probably ask the goddess to like be next, basically, or if they kill Vincent before that happens. And this just kind of rattles that whole framework. But what you see is this tension where Oriah doesn't want to believe that it's the Rishans because Rain is Rishan and she's seen good in him, and she knows that he himself didn't have anything to do with it because they were out together hunting vampires who were killing humans. But you also see her understanding why Vincent would think that it's the Rishans, because that's always been his natural born enemy. And the change with this, though, is that she starts to see Vincent a little bit differently. She starts to see that she herself is changing and her perception of these vampires are changing. And that for the first time, that it's not just like purely blind loyalty she has towards him and like trust in what he's saying. She is having these minor moments of like doubt and question, not necessarily doubt in what he's saying. Like if he says it's the Rishans, it's not that she thinks that it's not, because she knows that there are Rishan vampires out there who would do this. It's more of like she's seeing his motivations and his way of thinking differently for the first time ever. And he also is seeing her a little bit differently, because although she's careful with her words to not like reveal too much of herself, and she knows better than to question him. He just knows her so well that it's like he can pick up on this nuance of hesitancy, right? Or shift in approach, but they don't ever fully have this conversation of like questioning each other. But the part about it that kind of drives this home even further is she pleads with him to say, you know, I need you to keep Rain intact. I need him to be in one piece, because if he doesn't make it through this next trial, I'm dead. He's my ally. So like, if only for that, I need you to like rein it in. And ultimately they end up making it through the trial fine, but he does get really hurt. He gets hurt before that trial because of the interrogation, because he's a Rishan vampire. But the tenderness that Oriah has for him in knowing that he was tortured because he's Rishan, even though he had nothing to do with the attack, solidifies even more so that she is starting to form her own views and opinions of things, even if she is very slow to realize it. It's like the beginning of her moving away from everything that her life was and what she was basically forced to think because of living in the Hiyaj like world and with a Hiyaj ruler, that she is now in a place where she can have her own thoughts and feelings because she's seeing things for the first time. It's not just the fact that she's in this tournament, it's that she's exposed to this stuff firsthand. It's not all fully coming through a filter, because she's seeing it happen. She's seeing the destruction, she's seeing the war, because the attack on the Moon Palace has nothing to do with the tournament that they're in. And her seeing Rain getting like the outcome of him having been tortured, she's realizing that even if it's not Vincent doing it himself, there is a level of fear and like terror that he's ruling with that she, for the first time, is on the other side of. And she holds on pretty tightly throughout these interactions that she has with Vincent during this time to this balance of, I'm really seeing who he really is, but I know that he loves and he cares about me. And those things are at odds with each other. The fact that he's her father figure is winning out time and time again in every one of those instances, but her feelings for Rain are strong enough that nothing with him is changing. They're still close as ever and getting this affection for each other, but it's starting to kind of sow these seeds of doubt in her mind, even if she doesn't fully realize it yet. And the thing that kind of struck me about all of this when I was reflecting after I had read this set of chapters was, whatever it is, if it's just the years and centuries that the Rishans and the Hiyajas have been at war with each other, or like a bias that Vincent has, or whatever the case may be, whatever that motivating factor is and that drive is for him to hate them so, even if it's just, again, like their history with each other and this just historical lineage of always being at odds with each other, what we as a reader don't see is if there's ever any doubt that it's not them. He never brings that forward. That's never discussed to Oriah, so we don't see that point of view or understand if he's ever thinking that. And in the moment where her and Vincent are having conversations about this attack, it didn't really hit me then, but it was later that I had this thought of like, it very well could be another house and another enemy that is trying to make it seem like the Rishans, so that this court like just tears each other apart from the inside out, so that somebody else can ultimately take over, rule for whatever reason, or get something from it, or get some gain out of it. And it hit me for some reason when they got out of the battle where they had to ally together, and Oriah saw the guy that she had seen at the river who offered her cigarillos before. She comes to find out that he's part of the Bloodborns, and their exchange is very little, but her tune of when she first met him to who she sees now is very different. When she first met him, there was a little bit of this like laissez-faire intrigue, not really registering that he might be somebody that is involved in this whole tournament or have any stake in it, other than the fact that he said he bet on her. But like, the public knows that this tournament's happening. So he really kind of came across as this mysterious, potentially attractive, just kind of like blip on the radar, until this point where they cross paths again, when they are purposefully at this ball and this celebration to like celebrate all the people who made it through this halfway point of the tournament where they had to ally with other people. And she automatically has a very different impression. Every fiber of her being is like averse to this person. And so when Rain comes up and they have a little exchange, he says to her after, like, he is just trying to talk to whoever he can in this tournament and weasel his way through, because it's not necessarily about what the Bloodborne would get if they win the tournament. Because what Oriah comments on in her inner monologue that we see as a reader is that Nyaxia has such a grind against them that she cursed them in the first place. So that's why they have the curse where they turn into these like feral beasts at some point in time. So much so that when a Bloodborne person had won the trial, whenever it was, how many ever years ago, she almost didn't grant that winner what she had asked for. And ultimately she did, but it's like she really wants nothing to do, like Nyaxia does not like that group of vampires at all because of some shit way in the past and some disagreement and whatever. But what Rain is commenting on is like they come because regardless of this cursed life that they live, they just want power. They want power, and that power comes from allyships in other houses. So even if they don't have a huge stake in who's actually winning, they will come to every event because all of the houses are in the same places, right? They're all coming to watch this tournament happen, and they can essentially network and like communicate and kind of sow these seeds of allyship as a way to get power for whatever reasons it is that they want it. And so it's the first time that you see this person be positioned as an enemy that's on the board that we weren't already tracking. Because when you think about it, you have Vincent, you have Oriah, you had Alana, who's now passed, you have Rain, and you have Mish, who are allies, but everyone else is kind of on the peripheral. Like, there are people who are mentioned, there are contestants in this tournament that are mentioned by name. You have Ibrahim, who, you know, Oriah was once friendly with, but he's obviously now a competitor. You have a few others that are named and that come up now and again as they go through these trials, but you don't really have this broad enemy that is defined other than the threat of this tournament itself. And this person, I'm forgetting his name, but this guy who's part of the Bloodborne court and whatever, is the first time that it feels like we have an identified threat. And it's not just like house versus house or court versus court. It's a specific individual. So I'm interested to see where he comes in the future. The part about this that just gets me, though, is that I've had moments coming off of that challenge where they allied together from when that chapter ended to where I am now, probably another, I don't know, I would say anywhere from like 5 to 8 chapters that I had read since that point, where I just felt like it was such a pull for me to get through these chapters. Even when they're in the thick of battle and stuff, like it goes by pretty quickly and I can read it with ease to a degree, but it just feels like I'm really working through this text. And I feel like when I first read this book, I kind of remember it feeling the same way, but I was interested enough to keep going. And then I realized that it was part of a larger series. And obviously, like, I didn't have the books at the time, but there's like the peripherals of it that vaguely feel familiar and certain things that feel familiar when I read it. But if you had asked me what this book was about before, I wouldn't have remembered. And I really hate to say that because I have been so curious about this author for so long that I think I'm waiting a little bit with bated breath that once I get through this book to see how the standalone book and then how the second book, which is the direct continuation of this book, makes me feel, and if my perspective of her writing changes. Because right now, it's not that I don't like it. I just feel like I'm having a hard time getting into it and immersed in it. And it could be because of what else I'm reading at this time. It could be because I'm reading text by an author that I really like. Right now, as I'm recording this, I just finished the second book in Crescent City, and a bunch of shit pops off there, which is already awesome, but also it's SJM, right? So like I'm a big fan of her writing. It certainly could be that, but I feel like I kind of felt this way the first time too. And again, I want to keep going and I want to keep reading it, but it just feels like I'm working much harder to get through this writing. And so I just want to comment on it because I'm very interested to see if that changes once I get through this first book and finally onto new text that I truly don't know what the story is and I hadn't read it before. But I really just kind of don't like to feel this way because I hate to say that I don't much remember what the book was about. I really kind of put it out of my mind. I think because I knew that I was always going to reread it for the sake of when the series fully came together. But it feels like such a disservice to what this could be. So I say all of that to say that I am going to continue charging forward, of course. And I know that this is kind of a weird tangent to put right in the middle of like a book review, but I'm commenting on it because it took me a little bit of effort to get to this point of getting through as many chapters as I did. I wanted to feel like I read enough to make a recording worthwhile and not just record to record. But it kind of took me really pushing myself to get there. And right now, for me, the main thing that is really getting me through, and this is kind of how I felt the first time, is the relationship between Oriah and Rain and like what it's ultimately going to kind of shape out to be and what it looks like going forward. Because there is something there where there's still just there's this falter, there's this hesitancy, they're holding back for many obvious reasons, but then there's moments where he'll say stuff to her or comments to her that is beyond cheeky, it's beyond flirtatious, it's downright sexual, and she is noticing that she's responding to it more in this like flirtatious way, and she'll comment on the feelings she has in her body and her responses and all of this kind of stuff, that you know that it's not just in the way that she interacts with him that is changing how they feel about each other. It's the perspective that we're getting from her point of view in how she talks about her physical reaction to him and how she feels around him. And you start to see, and in the writing itself where she's commenting on how her physical reaction towards Rain is shifting. And so I think what makes it difficult is being a romantasy fan. That relationship isn't the spiciest of the spicy in this book. It's not the most tense in my opinion. It's flirtatious and it's intriguing, but it's not the most tense, juiciest writing that I would have loved to see. When that is the case, and then you have this story behind it that I'm like interested in, but I'm not fully invested in, it's making it harder for me to have enough interest to read a lot at once. And when I don't read a lot at once, it makes it harder for me to record because sometimes a couple of days can go by from when I've read stuff to when I start again, that if all of those chapters are getting talked about together in one recording, it's hard for me to kind of remember everything because again, it's not even just that I'm not fully vested in the writing. It's just so much is going on in my mind that even in books I really love, I have to kind of remind myself of what I've read and what has happened. That happens with pretty much any book I read. So especially with one that I'm struggling a little bit with and not like super just like, damn, I love this so much. It makes it a little bit harder. And so I guess I just wanted to say that here as a part of this episode because I would be curious if anybody else feels that way. As you're reading this book, are you really vested in this tournament and the story that is unfolding behind, which is really the central story, which is who is coming in terms of attacking them and what is the biggest threat to Oriah and to Vincent, and what is the outcome going to be not only of this tournament, but of what is ultimately going to set up her life going forward? Are you really intrigued by this text enough to be fully vested in that story? Or like me, are you more vested in kind of the romance side of things? And how do you feel about that? I am just interested in it because in a lot of the stories and romanticities that I've read so far, there is such a good balance. It's like you get the lust and you get the love and you get the affection as it's not even a side plot or like side story of the wider conflict that's happening, but it kind of is. The authors that I've read, whether it be Rebecca Yarros or SJM or Tracy Dion, whether it's full romantasy or more young adult, these types of these types of fantasy books with either full-on romance or light touches of it have done a very, very good job of keeping the conflict so enticing and intriguing and present, but yet weaving in the lust and the affection and whatever, that it feels just like all one and the same. Whereas with this book, I haven't found that stride yet. So I want to kind of set the tone for this because I want to see what my reaction is when I record the final episode once I finish this book, because I do think that I'll be able to get through the rest of the chapters of this book and do one more recording for this read-along series. I not only want to see how I feel then, and I'm going to read the standalone and then read the second book of this duology. I want to just see how I feel. And this kind of happened with Crescent City, right? Where it fell a little bit flat for me and then it had picked up. I don't know if that is going to be the case here. So I'm interested to see if my tone changes and if my love and my interest for these characters changes. I actually really am more interested in how I would feel about the other books in this Crowns of Nyaxia series. I am so interested to see who those stories end up being about and what it is like to get their perspective of what is going on with their like kingdom and those separate like houses, because this first one is obviously the House of Night with this book and the duology, the second book in the duology, and then you have the other two houses that come out in those other two, kind of mini sets inside of this wider Crowns of Nyaxia world. And so I have a lot of intrigue in it. And I'm saying all this and tangenting to say this because not only is it going to come up again in any of my future episodes because it is such a big point in terms of how my feelings come across when I record and how I progress in terms of how much I read, but because I just don't know if it's that my expectations are so high and what I'm getting out of it just doesn't meet them, and therefore it is kind of tainting my interpretation of these characters and my interest in them, or if it's really just that the writing doesn't resonate with me and I have to just accept that it's a fine series, but it's not one of my favorite. Because after all, there are many authors and many series out there, and not every single one of them is going to be great. But I think that in just reflecting all the read-alongs that we've done so far and knowing that freaking Fourth Wing and the Legendborn cycle and Crescent City are crushing all so hard in their own ways, it's hard to come into a series that you just aren't really into. But again, it wasn't that love at first sight with Crescent City. It's taken a minute, right? And so only time will tell. But I say all of that to say that I don't have a ton, I guess, to comment on. This is a very long tangented point of me talking more about the writing and the author and how I'm feeling from that regard, to say that I don't have a lot to comment on. There's a lot that has happened with these characters, and I'm intrigued to see what happens. I'm intrigued to see what comes of Mish. I'm intrigued to see of where things do go with Rain and with Oriah. I'm intrigued of how some of the other characters that we're seeing, what, if any, part that they play in this standalone or the second book of this duology. There's a lot of questions that I have of like where this is all going to go, which is why my interest is still there enough to continue going and to continue reading. And if I remember correctly, I do think that Mish's story does get touched on at some point. I can't remember if it's one of the standalones or if it's one of the other series, because in one of the chapters that I already read in this group for this recording, Rain tells Oriah that he has asked her where she comes from, and she would never answer him, because you find out more about her story, right? So when we find out that she was serving a god and she came to like do a mission to basically like preach to the vampires, and she was turned, she then like tried to leverage some power from that god who really wasn't the god to like give her power, because when she was turned as a vampire, she needed to basically like lay fealty to Nyaxia, and she didn't do that. And so there's a lot of like conflict in how that all works, which I'm not totally clear on, but it's not great from what I'm gathering. But she came from somewhere, right? In terms of like where she ended up settling. She's not a House of Night vampire. She's not a Rishin. She's not a Hiaj. So it's like he claims that he doesn't know. And so I do think that one of these other books, if not one of the other duologies, is about her. And what's really hard for me with that right now is she seems to be just such this young, flighty character that I don't find a lot that I identify with in her. And she isn't a character that I feel the desire to know more at this current state. And so that is actually a point in the column of like potential negatives of me continuing on with these books, because it worries me that centering so much on her isn't going to be something that I can identify with. When I see the kind of character that Oriah is, I cannot imagine then centering Mish at the center of a story with how kind of nutso she is, and to want to read a full book, let alone two, about her. And so I want to be proven wrong in that. I want my perspective to shift. I'm going to be open-minded to it, but this is both a series right now that I'm interested enough in to keep going and to record about and to share my thoughts about, obviously, but I'm struggling with it a little bit. And so we're just going to see how things net out, because as always, the only path is the path forward. So I appreciate you guys being here. Please share your thoughts on YouTube of how you're feeling. Are you really loving this? Are you loving any particular characters? Do you have any theories of what's going to happen? Is there thoughts of what you want to see versus what you think is going to actually happen? I would love to, of course, hear any and all thoughts that you have. So please share in the comments on YouTube and stay in touch with us on socials as we continue to do read-alongs and communicate what books we're going to be reading and the schedules and chapters we're going to be reading and all of that good stuff. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys so much for being here and for reading along. And until next time, friends.